The Kremlin is considering Donald Trump's proposal for a first-stage ceasefire in Ukraine. The White House proposed to Russia a ceasefire in the air without an actual cessation of hostilities on the front lines. This is exactly the proposal that Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is bringing to Moscow. This is reported by Bloomberg, which emphasizes that Putin may agree to halt the shelling of peaceful cities without actually stopping the war. This would allow Trump to claim that his ultimatum worked and now Moscow is ready to move toward a phased end to the war. At the same time, Trump is threatening to impose additional sanctions against Russia's shadow fleet and lower oil prices worldwide, which would devastate the Russian economy. In this episode, we'll discuss the likelihood of this scenario. I'm Alexei Pechi. We'll go through everything step by step, but before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, Bloomberg agency writes that the Kremlin is weighing options for concessions to United States President Donald Trump, which could include an air ceasefire with Ukraine in an attempt to prevent the threat of secondary sanctions. Even though Russia is still determined to continue the war, officials in the Kremlin acknowledge that the visit of United States Special Representative Steve Witkoff to Russia this week provides a belated opportunity to finally reach an agreement with Trump, even if success seems unlikely. A suspension of drone and missile airstrikes on peaceful Ukrainian cities as a gesture of de-escalation could be one of the potential proposals, provided that Ukraine also agrees to a similar ceasefire. And it's telling that the Kremlin suddenly started considering such an air ceasefire right after Ukrainian drones struck 2 oil refineries in Russia last week. Let me remind you, after the Ukrainian drone attack on the night of August 2, the Rosneft oil refinery in Novokuybishevsk stopped its operations and the one in Ryazan cut its capacity in half. Against this backdrop, the price of AI 95 gasoline in Russia hit a new record. This past weekend, Ukraine attacked the Russian oil refineries with drones for the first time since March, when unmanned aerial vehicles crashed into the Moscow oil refinery in Kapotnya, as well as the Lukoil facility in Volgograd. Also, on August 2, the Elektropibor plant in Penza was attacked, which produces control elements for missile systems and communication systems. Overall, the Rostov, Samara, Voronezh, Belgorod and Lipetsk regions, as well as the Krasnodar territory, were under attack. And now, after this, the Kremlin is suddenly considering going for an air ceasefire. Nevertheless, according to Bloomberg, Putin will not agree to a general ceasefire in Ukraine since his troops continue to advance on the battlefield and Russia's military goals remain unchanged. It is unclear whether any proposal for restrictions will include conditions that would effectively make it unacceptable for Kyiv and Ukraine's allies. Trump stated that Witkoff is expected to visit Russia as early as Wednesday. This will be the 5th time this year. The Kremlin has also announced a possible Witkoff-Putin meeting. The United States president is threatening to impose high tariffs starting Friday on countries, including China and India, that buy Russian oil and other goods, trying to increase pressure on Putin in order to end the full-scale war, which has been going on for the 4th year now. So does Trump need some kind of concession from Russia, and could an air ceasefire be such a gift from Putin? Trump could avoid imposing new sanctions, citing the fact that Putin agreed to negotiations. Trump increased his criticism of India on Tuesday, stating that he will significantly raise tariffs on Indian exports to the United States within the next 24 hours. To punish New Delhi for buying Russian oil and fueling Putin's war machine, India called this move unjustified and is already sending its representatives to Moscow for consultations. And now they're back, returning to the White House with a promise of a swift end to the war. Trump is increasingly disappointed by Putin's refusal to agree to a ceasefire during 6 phone conversations with the Russian dictator since February. Last week, Trump told reporters that they had such respectful and pleasant conversations. And the next day, people die from a missile that hit the city. That was a quote from Trump. Well, it's also telling that the dictator of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenka, in his speech on Friday, accompanied of course by Putin, raises the issue of that very air truce, although the Russian dictator did not comment on this topic in any way. In June, Lukashenka met with Trump's special representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, who, by the way, became the first high-ranking United States official to visit Belarus since 2020. And so, on Friday, Lukashenka made the following statement, quote, Keith Kellogg himself is expected to visit Kiev at the end of this week for talks with the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. In addition, Zelensky stated that on Tuesday he had productive phone talks with Trump, including on the issue of sanctions against Russia. Trump was fully informed about the Russian strikes on Kyiv and other cities, and this kind of interest from Trump in the strikes on peaceful Ukrainian cities also kind of hints at possible concessions from Putin on this issue. More precisely, Trump might have been trying to understand if Zelensky and Ukraine were ready to agree to such a truce format. In recent weeks, Russia has intensified its air attacks on Ukraine, including using a record number of drones, against the backdrop of Putin maintaining tough demands in exchange for a ceasefire agreement. Among them are Kyiv's acceptance of neutral status, recognition of Russia's annexation of Crimea, and 4 regions in eastern and southern Ukraine which Putin's forces only partially occupy. Ukraine rejects these conditions while at the same time calling on Russia to agree to a complete ceasefire in order to create space for negotiations on a peace agreement. But is it worth trusting Putin? Even if he agrees to an air ceasefire, Putin is not unambiguous. He has repeatedly ignored calls from the United States and Europe to observe a 30-day ceasefire, although he did declare a 72-hour truce in May when Russia marked the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. In March, let me remind you, Ukraine and Russia announced that they would observe a 30-day moratorium on strikes against energy infrastructure facilities. After phone conversations with Trump, however, just a day later, Russia violated this agreement as well. Therefore, it is already officially known that Steve Witkoff will be in Moscow tomorrow. Tomorrow, meaning August 6th, and we'll see what the parties will come to. Meanwhile, Kit Kellogg will be in Kiev. That's all for now. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.